afternoon, everyone. This is John Rust on the Radio, the John Rust Show on Freedom 95, 950 AM and 95.9 FM on your radio dial, the right station for talk. So, folks, this week, Republicans got slaughtered across the country at the November 4th election polls, unfortunately. Why? Republicans have completely abandoned economic conservatism, with Virginia's Jim Banks, who pretends to represent Indiana in the U.S. Senate, voting for trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of new debt, and voting this year, even when Trump is president, for Biden levels of government spending. The Republican Party has crashed, and Jim Banks' poll numbers here in Indiana show exactly that. We are so sick of these career politicians who say how conservative they are when they visit Indiana, but vote the exact opposite in D.C. Again, at the bottom of the barrel in the polls, Jim Banks voted for the law that released criminals from prison early. He voted for the law that released sex offenders from prison early. He voted for the law that released fentanyl dealers from prison early. And he voted for trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of new government debt that is crashing our economy as we speak. Jim Banks is bankrupting the entire country. You know, we called him Jim Bankruptcy a few weeks ago on the show. I think that is his new name, Jim Bankruptcy from Virginia. Again, he pretends to be a conservative fighter, but he just votes solid left wing when it comes to government spending and for voting for Biden levels of government spending. You know, no wonder he moved to Virginia. Virginia folks on November 4th had a massive Democratic landslide. I guess Jim Banks must have actually voted in Virginia because the Democratic vote totals were incredible. That's not what we want. We want conservatives to show up for the polls, but they didn't show up on Tuesday because our Republicans in Congress and in the Senate have let us down. You know, the Democrats in the Virginia House of Delegates went from just a one-vote narrow majority to a Democrat super majority. Let me repeat that. The Democrats in the state of Virginia went from just a one-vote majority to a Democratic super majority. That's a tidal wave, folks. And it happened all across America. And Jim Banks praised it. What did he come out and say? He said this, actually. He said, Jim Banks said that New York City Mayor-elect Mandami is great news for states like Indiana. We should not have to abandon New York City. We shouldn't have to abandon Minnesota. We shouldn't have to abandon Detroit to radical leftist Democrats. But Jim Banks is cheering it on because having those crazy leftists in office is the only thing he can point to say he is better. That's pathetic. He had the gall to say the truth, that Indiana is a great state to raise a family, even though he moved to Virginia. What's up with that? Why did he abandon Indiana for Virginia? Folks, career politicians have destroyed the Indiana Republican Party. We need grassroots economic conservatives to retake our party. We need to be saying no to higher property taxes. Instead, the Indiana establishment GOP is pushing property taxes higher and higher through unfair tax assessments. We need to say no to the fourth highest gasoline tax in the country. Instead, the Indiana GOP establishment is pushing tolls for every mile of Indiana interstates and forcing local counties to enact new wheel taxes to punish you for driving your car even more. The Indiana establishment GOP has bought into the Green New Deal grift that you're a bad person if you even try to drive your car to church or to a job. They just want to tax you on everything you do. We need to be saying no to data centers. Instead, the Indiana establishment GOP is pushing data centers, solar farms, and wind farms on Hoosiers all across our state. And as a result, our electricity prices are skyrocketing. Folks, in 2023, electricity rates in the state of Indiana went up 9%. Just this year, they went up another 17%. Folks, we cannot afford to have establishment career politicians running our state anymore. Remember, and this is clear as a bell to me, it seems pretty obvious, and I cannot believe our Republicans in the state of Indiana are not embracing coal because it is absolutely the cheapest form of electricity, period. Remember, folks, Kentucky burns coal to get most of their energy, and per kilowatt, Kentucky pays only 12 cents per kilowatt. Guess what? Indiana pays 17 cents per kilowatt. We pay 5 cents more per kilowatt than Kentucky. That is over 30% more. And why? Because Indiana politicians are rushing to close our wonderful coal-powered plants and convert them into more expensive natural gas or untested nuclear or much more expensive wind farms and much, much, much more expensive solar farms. Again, folks, the wind farms may work great if it's windy, and the solar farms may work great if it's sunny, but the real driver behind wind and solar energy, folks, is subsidies, pure and simple. That is the only reason those exist. We should be letting the market decide whether solar and wind energy is right for Hoosiers, not have it be forced on us and cause us to have these much higher electricity prices that we have today, now. The leftist Green New Deal GOP establishment hates coal because they believe in the global warming climate change scam. They hate you owning your own car as they think you are nothing but a polluter that needs to be taxed even more. I can't believe I'm saying that in the state of Indiana, but with how they keep taxing us through now wanting to have tolls for every square mile of interstate, through the fourth highest gasoline tax in the country, it's pretty obvious. Our politicians in the state of Indiana do not like you driving your own car. So as a result of this terrible election result, President Trump said rightly, and this is where I disagree with a lot of other Indiana radio personalities on this, we do have to absolutely get rid of the filibuster. I've talked about this in previous shows. This is from President Donald J. Trump. Terminate the filibuster, not just for the shutdown, but for everything else. We will get all our common sense policies approved. Voter ID, anyone? And make America great again. Remember, the Democrats will do it immediately as soon as they get the chance. Our doing it will not give them the chance. Republicans, be tough and smart. The Dems are crazed lunatics. They will not open up our country no matter how many people are irreparably harmed. Folks, that's from Donald J. Trump talking about how Republicans like Todd Young and Jim Banks are hiding behind the filibuster to pass a budget resolution. And unfortunately, the one they're trying to pass, it's awful. It increases government debt and it funds the government at Biden levels. Number one, we should be cutting government debt, not increasing it. Number two, government spending has to be decreasing. We should be enacting the Doge cuts. Remember those? That's all been swept under the rug. You don't hear anything about Doge cuts anymore, do you? But on the nuclear option for the filibuster, this is what Senator John Thune had to say about it. He says, Senate Republicans don't have the support to eliminate the filibuster in the Senate. Speaker Mike Johnson opposes eliminating the Senate filibuster. I would just say, why do voters put up with this? Why do we have it today where we have the presidency, the Senate, and the House with a clear Republican majority in every branch of government, and we refuse to do the right thing by cutting government? Instead, people like Jim Banks and Todd Young, who love big government, are continuing to vote for Biden levels of spending. Again, and that includes the entire GOP Indiana House delegation. Everyone from Aaron Hounchin to Marlin Stutzman voted for that bill, that continuing resolution to continue funding the government at Biden levels. That's unacceptable. You know, Jefferson Shreve, you're new in Congress. Why are you going along and funding Biden levels of spending? He's not even president. President Trump is president. I guarantee you, if Congress were to pass a balanced budget, which they could today, and reduce government debt, I absolutely guarantee you President Trump would sign it. Instead, we get all this rigmarole and talk about, oh, we have to protect the filibuster. Why do they want to protect the filibuster? because it protects the status quo. And that's what these career politicians love. They don't want change. They want their cushy jobs in Washington where the special interests fund them, not the constituents. Folks, that's not the answer we need. We need to have government accountable. I absolutely believe in majority rule. Again, we have the House, Senate, and the presidency. Why on earth are Republicans not acting like Republicans and actually voting for conservative government spending and reducing that? That's where we're at. This is from Todd Starnes. There have been a lot of promises made by the White House and Congress. It's time to start delivering on those promises. Otherwise, the midterms next year will be a disaster. Amen and absolutely. And I hate saying this, but I always say I will speak the truth and shame the devil. Folks, all these career politicians in Washington, including those on the Republican side, including those from Indiana, they really want the Democrats to regain the House next year. You know why? Because then they can go out and beat their chest and say, well, I support President Trump, even though the Democrats will start impeaching him. And they'll say, well, I'm a conservative, even though they voted for Biden levels of government spending. But the new Democratic majority, unfortunately, if it does happen, will only increase spending more and more. So we're stuck with the lesser of two evils. And that's really what Todd Young, Jim Banks, Aaron Hounchin, Jefferson Shreve, anyone who voted for that continuing resolution is saying, I'm the lesser of two evils. But being the lesser of two evils still means you're evil. It doesn't mean you're an economic conservative when you're voting for massive new government debt, which they all did and they all are. My advice for Trump and conservatives in 2026, accelerate deportation, focus on the economy. This is from Wall Street Mad. Fund Scott Pressler, fire more federal workers, defund leftist NGOs, and cut government spending and actually reduce government debt to levels that it was before Biden became president. That is the bare minimum our alleged conservative Republicans in Congress should be doing. Folks, Trump said this. He said, I wasn't on the ballot. No, he wasn't. And he won't be on the ballot moving forward. The GOP has to be about economic conservatism, about fiscal responsibility. That's what Margaret Thatcher did in Britain in the very late 70s and all through the 1980s. She was unpopular at times, but everyone knew her strong economic policies of fiscal conservatism would bear fruit, and they did, and Britain was reborn as a result of that. She refused to increase government debt. She cut the size of government. She sold off government agencies right and left to make sure that the private sector, which always does better than what government does, would have a chance to make something work. As a result, the very inefficient British rail system went from being an albatross to a profit-making engine for Britain, helping rebirth the British economy. The same thing needs to happen here in the United States. Why are we subsidizing inefficient and often just plain wrong government agencies? For instance, the TSA should absolutely be privatized. Why is air traffic control not being privatized? We shouldn't be subject to having our flights cut just because our career politicians in Washington like to do this song and dance on the government funding every year. Why should the TSA agents have to pay the price for that? Folks, they have to pay their bills. They got to put food on their table. And it's the same with the air traffic controllers. They just want to get paid when they're going to work. What's wrong with that? And tying into what I want to have a deep dive in on today's program, we need to be saying no to diseased Argentinian beef. But the establishment GOP is fine with punishing American family farms. And that is the in-depth topic of today's show, how American family farms are getting screwed over by the GOP establishment in Washington. When we come back, folks, we are going to get into how the beef from over 1,000 cattle and from countries all over the world can make it into a single beef patty in your hamburger and it be labeled as product of the USA. Folks, our Washington leaders are lying through their teeth to protect their political donors. Find out how when we come back after this short break. This is John Rust on the Radio. Good afternoon, everyone. This is John Rust on the Radio, broadcasting on Freedom 95, 950 AM and 95.9 FM on your radio dial. Freedom 95, the right station for talk. I'm here in the studio today with Justin and Mike. Welcome, guys.
Well, thank you, John.
Thank you for the invitation, as always.
So, folks, in this episode, we're going to be asking the question, which was a very popular 1980s TV advertisement by Wendy's. Where's the beef? Mike, do you remember that commercial?
Yes, I do. Where is the beef? Evidently, at that time, it was at Wendy's, but where is it now?
Well, apparently, according to President Trump, it's in Argentina. Folks, in all seriousness, and this is unfortunately a very serious program topic, more than half of U.S. farms are losing money, threatening small towns and rural economies, not just here in Indiana, but all across our country. Farm bankruptcies in the 12 months ending in June were up 56% from the previous year.
I mean, that's so sad.
Well, we want to make America great again. We want to make farming great again. You know, I had an issue with Jimmy Carter when I was very young. One of the issues with Jimmy Carter when I was young, he used American farmers as a political weapon against Russia. Mike, do you remember the grain embargoes
Yes, I do.
that Jimmy Carter enacted? Those were devastating for American farmers. You know, folks, when your livelihood is on the line, you look at things differently than how a lot of politicians look at things.
You know, a lot of people, they just think of farming as a job, but farming isn't a job, it's a lifestyle.
And that's who's being hurt today. You know, in 1970, cattle ranchers earned 70 cents of every consumer beef dollar. Today, they get just 30 cents. This is from Dan Osborne on Twitter. I'm going to repeat that, folks. In 1970, cattle ranchers earned 70 cents of every consumer beef dollar. Today, they just get 30 cents. Where did the other 40 cents go? Straight to the pockets of JBS, Tyson, Cargill, and National Beef. The big four are robbing ranchers blind while consumers pay record prices. Both sides are getting screwed except the monopolists in the middle. When a cattle farmer sells their beef, they get a fixed price, but that's not anywhere near what the price you will pay at the grocery store is. And over time, over the last 50 years, it has dropped exponentially because these large packers have worked to make it so that they make more and more money, but the small farmer gets less and less. Well, this is from Meriwether Farms. When an American consumer walks into a store and purchases things like T-shirts, kids' toys, household items, each of these items has a mandated stamp or tag identifying the country in which it was produced or manufactured. Why is that not the case for beef? Again, this is from Meriwether Farms. We'll tell you why. It's because over the last decade, both the executive branch and Congress has facilitated the deception of the American consumer by allowing Big Four packing plants to sell foreign beef with a product of USA label on it, causing American ranchers to go out of business because they can't compete based on a lie. This needs to end. Again, this is from Meriwether Farms. This needs to end, and it needs to end forever. It's time to reinstate mandatory country of origin labeling once and for all. Call your representatives. Keep on making noise. The pressure is working. So, folks, call your congressman. Call your congress-lady. Call your U.S. senator. We have to have real mandatory country of origin labeling again, once and for all.
Exactly, because it would be deceitful to do otherwise.
Well, if you buy a pound of hamburger at the grocery store and it says product of the USA, you probably think, gosh, that was American beef. But you're wrong, even though it says product of the USA.
Exactly. That
is just the deception. That's a Washington, D.C. deception, folks. That's a Big Four deception, folks. I think most consumers want to buy American family farm produced beef if they can.
I think so.
I know I do.
And if you want to buy Argentinian beef, great, but it should be labeled Argentinian. If you want to buy American eggs, great. If you want to buy Turkish eggs, fine, fantastic. But it should be labeled that the eggs are from Turkey.
Exactly. The people should be told where it's coming from.
Yeah. Only common
Or
sense.
India or wherever. There should always, it's just like an item you buy on Amazon where it was manufactured. That's going to say where it was made. But just because that ground beef was processed in the United States doesn't mean it was produced in the United States. And that's the key. This is from Daniel Horowitz. Pass the Prime Act. Stop hobbling land with data centers. Folks, my response to that is let the free market work it out. And you have to understand in farming, you make good money 1 year and then you give it all back for the next 3 to 4 years. Mike, you know that in my family's egg business.
That's very true.
And so people say, oh, you're evil if you're making money 1 year. But in farming, that's probably the only year you're going to be making money for a very long time. And so we're just naturally conservative. And that's why I'm a huge fiscal conservative, because I grew up as a farmer. And I know that just because you have a lot of dollars today doesn't mean you're going to have a lot of dollars tomorrow. Because absolutely guaranteed, if the price is high today, it will be down tomorrow. That's just the way the free market works, and that's the way the free market is supposed to work.
But also farming is very unpredictable.
Well, there could be bird flu, there could be disease. Unfortunately, there's this disease going around in cattle in Argentina. We're going to be talking about that in a little bit. This is a bitter harvest season for many American farmers. There's nothing wrong with their crops, which are bountiful. But even as grain elevators overflow with freshly picked corn and soybeans, farmers are losing money on every bushel, and there's not much relief in sight. This is from a farmer. You have high production costs. You have low crop prices. And when you have the trade situation that exacerbates that condition, well, it's just bad news for all farmers. Why isn't China buying more American grain? It's not just the trade war. Most farmers are now operating well below the break-even point. This is from NPR. Court records show farm bankruptcies in the 12 months ending in June were up 56% from the previous year, and that ominous trend has continued. This is from Joseph Pfeiffer, an attorney who helps farmers file for bankruptcy in Illinois. We have had 5 new farm bankruptcy cases in the last 2 weeks. That's astonishing, shocking. And we're getting additional calls all the time. Farmers are facing desperate times. Farming is a low-margin business in the best of times, but with today's rock-bottom crop prices, growers are increasingly getting desperate. During Trump's first term in office, when China also boycotted U.S. farm products, the White House gave farmers $23 billion to cushion the blow. Again, this is from NPR. This year, the president has promised another farm bailout, but that would likely replace only a fraction of the income farmers have lost. Folks, my comment on this is, why are we importing 600,000 Chinese students from China when China's not buying any American soybeans? I believe in fair trade.
But that doesn't much seem like a fair trade now, does it?
No, that's strictly one-way trade. Really the best thing, this is from NPR again, really the best thing farmers would like is just a place to sell our commodities at a price we can make money at. Folks, farmers are eternal optimists. We wouldn't
plant today and hope for tomorrow.
Well, we wouldn't be in the egg business. My family wouldn't be egg farmers today were we not optimistic about what we do, because we love doing what we do. We love feeding America.
But you also had to adapt.
We adapted and we changed as the market changed. Absolutely. Had we not built these large farms that produce eggs efficiently, we just walked into a grocery store here in Franklin, and the price for a dozen eggs at Walmart today is $1.97.
Very reasonable.
We, the farmer, don't get that, but that's okay. Walmart has to pay their employees. But I think under $2 a dozen for a dozen eggs today is an incredible price considering what the U.S. dollar is doing. As the dollar keeps getting trashed by these career politicians who keep raising more and more government debt, which devalues the dollar. The dollars you have to use at Walmart, and Mike and Justin, you guys know this, you go into Walmart and you buy 5 items, it's going to be $50.
Yeah.
True.
No matter what you get.
can't barely fill up your cart without spending a couple $100.
That's a complete betrayal of our farmers. Beef prices are high because of the 4 giant meat packers, not because of our farmers who often work 2 or 3 jobs just to get by. And Justin, Mike, that's exactly what you guys were saying. You know so many farmers that have second jobs, absolutely, and third jobs. But, they love America. And I know so many farmers myself who farm and have a job, but they somehow find time to be volunteer firemen. They love their communities. In Jackson County, you see that over and over again.
And that's why, like I pointed out earlier, and like what you guys said, it's not just the job; it's a lifestyle, it's a life. I mean, it's not just one person doing the work.
It's an absolute life and lifestyle. Folks, we're out of time for this segment, but when we come back, we will get right back into beef prices and egg prices. This is John Rust on the Radio. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on the Radio on Freedom 95, 950 AM and 95.9 FM on your radio dial on Freedom 95, the right station for talk. I'm here in the studio with Justin and Mike. Welcome back, guys.
Good
Great to be back.
So before the segment, we were talking about how beef prices are in the tank for the farmers actually producing the cattle, but the meat packers themselves are raking it in. You go to the grocery store, folks, you're not going to see cheap beef prices. I guarantee you that. The farmers are getting just a fraction of that. Remember what we talked about on the show. In 1970, an American cattle farmer got 70 cents of every dollar of beef sold at retail level. Today, that's only 30 cents of every dollar at retail level. These big packers are literally making tons of money off the backs of the American family farmer. This is from Thomas Massey. Imagine that. Americans want to know where their food comes from. I'll be sponsoring legislation soon to reinstate country of origin labeling for beef and pork. And I would add eggs. This is especially important if our supermarkets are going to be flooded with beef from Argentina. So folks, what he's talking about, the Trump administration is pushing to increase Argentinian beef quotas for Argentinian beef sold here in the United States. This is from Roger Stone. Expect Argentine President Javier Milei to press President Trump for an increase in Argentine beef quotas when they meet this week, as America is facing a beef shortage due to the crazy environmental and anti-ranching policies of Joe Biden. That's partially true. The policies of Joe Biden were absolutely anti-farmer, 100%. Agree with that 100%. But the beef shortage is because American family farmers are not getting what they should be getting for the cattle they produce. Again, folks, in 1970, an American family farmer got 70 cents of every dollar for beef sold at the supermarket. Today, it's only 30 cents. The farmers are being let out to dry by these giant meat packers. So the giant meat packers, and I'm telling you the truth here, folks, and this is where I like to speak the truth and shame the devil. This is going to piss off a lot of people. And you're going to say, whoa, John Rust said that? Here it is. These big beef producers want the Argentinian beef so they can keep prices down for what they have to pay. But will you see that at the supermarket level? Do you think they're going to lower their prices, Mike?
Probably not.
Absolutely not.
No. This is from the Beef Initiative responded to Roger, why do we need foreign beef? As a free market capitalist, folks, I'll answer you, and I'm going to answer you this in egg farming terminology because that's what I know. When the egg market's high and you make a lot of money in the egg business, you do what my dad did. You go out and you build new, larger chicken farms. That's what we did every time we ever made money in the egg business. All my entire life. That's all my mom and dad did. My mom's 91 years old, and she's still working on how we can grow the business and make eggs more inexpensive for consumers by producing larger and larger farms that lower the cost to consumers. And that's why eggs are under $2 a dozen here at the Walmart in Franklin. So folks, we always put the money back in the business to always grow the business. That's what farmers do. They're optimistic. We didn't take that money and go out and buy fancy cars or fancy houses in Virginia. Why the free market matters on this, you have to allow the American family farmer to make their profit on good years so they can invest that back into their farms to survive the bad years. If we flood the market with Argentinian beef just because the market's high based on what the retailers are doing and not what the farmers are doing, the American farmer is getting double screwed on that. In capitalism, you have to make money to survive bad years. And a lot of people say, well, capitalism is a bad thing, but it's the best thing on earth to keep people efficient. It keeps my family's farms efficient because, folks, if we go out and we produce very expensive eggs, someone else will go out there and produce eggs much more inexpensively than us if they get a chance to do that. That's the free market at work, and that's what we want for the beef farmers. But they have to have a fair playing field. And when you're importing Argentinian beef just to temporarily lower the price for the big four packers, and not for consumers, but for the packers, that is just doubly hurting American farmers because they have no economic ability to reinvest in their herds, to grow their herds, so that in the future, cattle prices would be lower naturally just by letting the free market work.
And it's just plain wrong to do that to the farmers. It's just plain wrong.
Well, and this is the weird part on this, folks. The Trump administration warns Argentina beef might be diseased, but the U.S. may still import it.
I mean, how does that
That's
make
from
any
Newsweek,
How does
published
that-
on October 22nd, 2025. So this Argentinian beef that we're wanting to import is diseased and we want to bring it in? No.
Well, why would we want to do that? I mean, that don't make no sense.
Well, folks, listen to this. This is from the Beef Initiative on Twitter again. In 1998, a single fast food burger contained the meat from 1,082 different animals.
Say that again.
In 1998, a single fast food burger patty contained meat through DNA sampling of over 1,000 different animals. This is again from the Beef Initiative on Twitter. Today, it's imported scraps, ammonia-washed pink slime, and fat trimmings labeled product of USA. Local beef is getting murdered by a USDA-backed meat laundering racket. Folks, this is again from the Beef Initiative on Twitter. Multinational corporations search the world for the cheapest beef possible. 22 countries are eligible to export beef to the United States, the most profitable beef consuming market. Foreign beef is sourced and imported at below cost of production prices. Upon processing and repackaging, foreign beef can be legally sold as product of the USA. That's happening today, folks.
That's just not right.
As I said before, deceitful. I mean, there's nothing but deceitful.
Well, speak the truth, shame the devil. Shine the flashlight, expose the truth. We should always have truth of origin labeling on anything you buy, whether it's a computer, an iPhone. I know in your iPhone they were very clever where they say on the packaging it's designed in California or wherever in the USA, but it's always made, in China or now India. Certainly not here, but they have that big designed by or designed in California. This is from Fact Post on Twitter, and it's from Fox News. One tried and true brand is making a big comeback as consumers tighten their wallets. Hamburger Helper. The mix of mac and cheese and ground beef is seeing a surge in sales. And again from Beef Initiative, foreign beef exposed. This is shocking. Over 800,000 smuggled cattle, which is worth $1.2 billion, has been brought into Mexico. They bought them in Mexico for $650 per head and then flipped these same cattle in Texas for $1,500 each. The cartels cleared $120 million before the drug mule add-ons. This isn't ag, it's organized crime with ear tags. Investigate the beef packers. That's from Beef Initiative on Twitter, folks. And it's from an article in the Western Producer highlighting how cattle smuggling worsens an outbreak of New World screwworm disease in U.S. cattle. And that's what's going on in Argentina, and they want to bring that beef into the United States. We do not need to be bringing diseased product into the United States. No way. Folks, Daniel Horowitz, as always, he nails it right on. He says, the problem is that independent ranchers don't pony up the campaign cash like the meat processors and data centers do. This is from Farm Action on Twitter, and it's at Farm Action US. Mr. President, the big four meat packers, including Brazil's JBS and Marfrig, control beef prices, not American cattle ranchers. These global corporations have been making record profits off U.S. consumers while squeezing independent ranchers out of business. And this is from Thomas Massey. This is not America first. We don't need the U.S. flooded with beef from Argentina after our cattle ranchers have been taking a beating for the last several years. Bring back country of origin labels. Buy direct from a farmer. Pass the Prime Act. America first and make America healthy again. Again, that's from Thomas Massey. So, folks, we talk about conspiracy theories on here a lot, and there's another conspiracy coming on in eggs, and we're going to talk about that when we come back. This is John Rust on the Radio. Stay tuned. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on the Radio, your farmer and friend from Seymour, Indiana. My family, along with Mike Wilson, who's worked at Rose Acres for most of your life as well.
25 years.
We've done it for a long time, haven't we, Mike?
Yes,
Helping
we have.
feed America. 20 million Americans get fed every day with eggs produced by my family's farms. So, folks, we're in competition, and we love competition, but we believe in truth and labeling, and I want to go over something about eggs, as I am an egg farmer. There's this product you see in the grocery store. It's called Just Egg, J-U-S-T egg. And if you see this product and you think this giant label on it says Just Egg. So, Justin, what do you think's in that product that says Just Egg?
I mean, the idea would be that it would just be an egg, right?
Well, you would think so. Okay.
Here are the ingredients. Number 1, water. Number 2, mung bean protein isolate. Number 3, expeller pressed canola oil. Contains less than 2% dehydrated onion, gel and gum, natural carrot extractives for color, natural flavors, turmeric extract, potassium citrate, salt, sugar, tapioca syrup solids, tetrasodium pyrophosphate, transglutaminase, and lysine, a preservative.
I think they should change the name to just Add Egg.
Yeah, I was going to say that don't sound much like an egg to me.
Folks, that's, there is truth in labeling, fortunately for the ingredients at least, so they have to list that Just Egg is, all that tetrasodium pyrophosphate, whatever the heck that is, and transglutaminase. I don't even know what that is.
Me neither. What even is that product supposed to be anyway?
It's an egg replacement. So you can make an omelet from this. And it's for the vegans who don't believe in, eating animals or animal products, I guess. That's your choice. But I don't believe in misleading people. And just like where ground beef can say product of the USA, even though it's probably from all over the planet, that's wrong. It shouldn't be labeled product of the USA if it's not 100% produced in America, American beef. Just like Just Egg, who says they are just egg, is everything but an egg. I believe in truth and labeling, and we're not getting that. Just Egg is a product of Just Egg Incorporated. Guess who is behind Just Egg, Mike? Bill Gates. Of course.
Imagine that.
Yeah, isn't that a surprise? Folks, they don't want you eating chicken eggs. They want you eating this egg produced in a giant factory somewhere so that you get all the tetrasodium pyrophosphate and transglutaminase that you possibly can with your morning omelet. What is that stuff? I don't even know what it is. It's farcical. I can't believe I have to say this on the radio. That, a product like that is being sold. And it is labeled Just Egg. Just like American beef that is not American beef is being labeled as product of the USA, even though it's being imported from China or wherever.
I mean, that's what these elitists do. They bend the truth, they lie, they mislead. I mean, all of it.
Well, this multi-billion-dollar company, it's also selling lab-grown chicken in Indonesia.
If I want to eat a chicken, I want my chicken to be grown naturally. I don't want
Well,
in a
if you're
lab.
not eating if you're not eating lab-grown chicken, apparently you're not getting your fill of trans-sodium pyrophosphate or trans-glutamines.
Yeah, oh, you got to have that. That's essential right there. You can't live without whatever
That's
heck
what
that
Bill
is.
Gates wants you to eat. So if you're not eating bugs, you have to get your fill of tetrasodium pyrophosphate and trans-glutamines.
Does it even taste like an egg?
That's a good question.
I'd like to know.
That's a really good question, actually.
But I don't plan on buying any of that.
I've never
Right.
tasted it, but I suspect it tastes just like tetrasodium pyrophosphate and trans-glutamines. Sorry, folks. I'm laughing about it. It's so farcical. This stuff. When you see it and they put it in the refrigerated section next to the eggs, and this stuff probably has a lifespan of 3,000 years in the desert, and they put it in the refrigerated section next to the eggs, and label it as just eggs. They're doing this. And this is from the founder. He says, we're going to start a food company that takes the live animal, out of the equation of the food system. So, folks, they're saying the quiet part out loud. They just don't want you eating meat. They don't want you eating real eggs. They want you to only be eating terasodium, pyrophosphate, and transglutaminase.
Why would you want to eat something like that's so chemically produced, like in a lab, instead of something that's grown naturally through the processes of the earth? Like,
it all goes back to last week's program, and it all goes back to global warming. They believe animal agriculture is harming the environment because of all the carbon being produced, allegedly. The cows are passing gas too much, sorry. No, and Bill Gates, speaking of the cows passing too much gas, Bill Gates is in on that. He's trying to force a product on farmers called Bovar, which reduces the flatulence of cattle so they don't pass gas. Putting it politely there, folks.
I mean, this is just comical.
So it's follow the money. Bill Gates, he just has his tentacles in everything. And it's all about making you, the consumer, only buy products that he's behind and he produces, rather than from an American family farmer who happens to have a cow that may pass gas on occasion, or a flock of chickens that produces some beautiful eggs for some very tasty omelets. And, like folks, I'll say it again, my family's farms, we produce eggs. You know what the ingredients are on our eggs, Mike?
I assume it's just egg.
Absolutely, just eggs. But if you buy just eggs, the product that says just eggs, you're getting tetrasodium pyrophosphate and transglutaminase. So the same company behind Just Egg, which is anything but egg, is producing cultured meat now for sale in Indonesia. And it's either taken from a live bird or through a biopsy from a dead chicken, and then that is grown in a lab, and the process takes about 14 days from start to finish. And the end product is a raw, minced, quote-unquote, meat. They make chicken nuggets out of this stuff. And that chicken nugget is now available in Singapore restaurants, retailing about $17 per serving. You guys think that sounds tasty?
That's starting to make dog food sound good.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But behind all this, and this is from an article called Startups, written by Karen Gilchrist. The wider agriculture industry is responsible for 10 to 12% of greenhouse gas emissions, a major contributor to climate change. Folks, again, pull up on my podcast from last week's show. We did a show on, had Noah paid a tax, could he have avoided having to build an ark? But as I said in that episode, and I'll repeat it here, there may be climate change, but it's certainly not man-made. So folks, just relax. Try to avoid, if you can, your servings of tetrasodium pyrophosphate and transglutaminase. Just have a real egg.
I agree.
And try to find a local market for a local farmer-produced beef. So, folks, again, I'm a farmer. I see things in black and white. I have to make a payroll. Just like you, I have to pay my bills to feed my chickens so that my farm's chickens can produce a dozen eggs you can enjoy at home. I understand economic conservatism and the power of free markets, which is why eggs are under $2 a dozen here at the Walmart in Franklin. I just checked this morning. Eggs went crazy high when bird flu wiped out flocks and there was not enough supply, but we farmers repopulated the flocks as fast as we could to get the supply back and the prices back down. That's the free market at work. No government intervention was necessary. The free market took care of you and the consumer. We don't have a free market when large packers force Americans to eat foreign beef and drive American family farmers out of business when they can label foreign beef as product of the USA. Denying beef farmers a fair price for their cattle will only make America more and more reliant on diseased foreign beef being dumped on American markets. And in the long run, you will keep paying a higher and higher price at the store because American family farmers will quit producing cattle if they can't make money at it. They have to pay their bills just like you and I do. Again, folks, the big four packers are taking all the profit while we, the consumers, pay more and more. And the career politician establishment GOP is letting this all happen because they like taking the checks from those big packers. Well, folks, the Republican Party got our hat handed back to us on November 4th. We have to retake our party and make it economically conservative again. We have to embrace free markets again. We can't let the IEDC and the establishment GOP pick winners and losers in our Hoosier economy. We can't make you pay to promote Indiana jobs for out-of-state residents. But that's happening today right here in Indiana. Folks, we're out of time, but please check out the podcast of this program on nearly all podcast broadcasters: Apple, Amazon, iHeart, Spotify, and YouTube. Just search for The John Rust Show. So, folks, I'm going to close with my father's favorite Bible verse, Psalm 118, verse 24. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Folks, I'll see you all again next week on the radio.